Okay, we're talking about methylation activation, all the fancy schmancy kinds of chemistry reactions that happen in the body to keep us healthy. Specifically, we're talking about something called DMAE, dimethylaminoethanol. It's one of those chemicals that sticks a little methyl on to other chemicals. It's a methylating agent. It improves brain health. It's found naturally in our brains, completely non-toxic, completely gentle stuff. It can be helpful for patients who have Alzheimer's disease or of other dementias, movement disorders, or you can use it just to improve focus and mental clarity. Most brain supplements are going to include a little DMAE, dimethylaminoethanol. One of the most interesting applications of DMAE involves something called lipofusion. Most people haven't heard of lipofusion, but most people should hear of lipofusion because it is responsible for a lot of the signs of aging. It's one of the most misunderstood aspects in all of skin health, and it's responsible for a type of hyperpigmentation or dark spots. Not exactly hyperpigmentation. Hyperpigmentation is the kind of blotchiness that occurs on our skin in response to the sun or in response to aging, in response to hormones like estrogen, or in response to stress hormones. Lipofusion is a little bit different from ordinary hyperpigmentation, dark spots. Lipofusion is a little bit lighter than dark spots, and lipofusion will appear deeper in the skin. And typically it'll appear on the face or on the hands. In fact, it's a rare man or woman after the age of 55 or 60 or so that doesn't have to deal with these kinds of dark spots. They look geographical. That's the best way I can describe them. They almost look like a country on a map. They're sort of they have an odd shape and an odd boundary. They kind of go in and they go out. My brother used to call them the map of France on my grandmother. She used to have all this lipofusion on her arms. So the take-home message here, the point I'm trying to make is that lipofusion and melanin are not the same thing. Lipofusion is lighter brown, it's deeper, it appears in the kind of geographical shapes. Melanin, or pigmentation, or hyperpigmentation, typically occurs in response to the sun, or in response to drugs, or in response to hormones, or in response to stress. It's not so much related to aging. Excuse me. Lipofusion has a kind of gummy quality that makes it stick. And that's why you have to have a healthy lymphatic system in order to drain this lipofusion out. As we get older, our lymphatics, that's our poison waste sewage system, kind of clogs up. Lymphatic congestion, lymphatic clogging can lead to an accumulation of this discoloration, this lipofusion discoloration. Cells are constantly producing waste. This lipofusion material is basically a cell waste. Cells are constantly producing this waste. Cells are constantly dying. And the body has to have an effective way for disposing of this waste material. As we get older and the lymphatic system starts to clog up, as our bodies degenerate, as cells start to break down, this waste removal system, along with everything else, begins to break down. And this is what shows up as an accumulation of this stuff I'm calling lipofusion. And that's spelled, by the way, Lipofuscin. Lipofusion shows up, as I say, discolorations in the face, hands, or anywhere else in the body. In fact, lipofusion is not just an external problem. It's not just something that shows up cosmetically on the face or on the hands. Lipofusion is really problematic because it shows up inside the body as well as on the outside of the body. And lipofusion has a very important connection to many of the diseases of aging, including age-related macular degeneration, Parkinson's disease, dementias, brain health issues, confusion, nerve issues, diseases of the central nervous system. Many of the signs of aging are associated with accumulation of this kind of dark brownish pigment inside the body as well as outside the body. And if you have these spots on your hands or in your arms or on your face, rest assured, you're probably accumulating this aging pigment inside the body as well. So what's the deal? What happens exactly to cause this accumulation of lipofusion? Well, in order to understand this, how this stuff accumulates, how this brown yellowish pigment accumulates, we got to understand something about a cell. We got to understand, well, first of all, we got to understand really what a cell is. We don't really think about this too much unless you're listening to The Bright Side. Hardly anybody ever talks about cells. Certainly your doctor isn't going to talk about cells because doctoring can't really do anything to address the health of a cell. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on inside a cell. A cell is a ridiculously complex system, but one of the most important things about a cell is its garbage disposal system. Just like the body has a waste disposal system called the lymph, every little individual cell has a little waste incinerator, a garbage incinerator. This is one of the coolest aspects in all of cell biology. There's literally a waste burning system built into every one of our cells in exactly the same fashion that you have as you have an incinerator in an apartment building or in a business or campsites, or sometimes municipalities will burn their garbage to efficiently get rid of it and keep it from rotting and decaying and accumulating bugs and wild animals and bacteria and smells. Each one of the 100 trillion cells in our body has its own built-in garbage incinerator system. This is so cool and underscores how absolutely amazing and efficient and complicated and intricate a simple little cell, 1/100th the size of a head of a pin, really is. Hang tight, I'll finish this up when we come back from our break. Okay, so I'm pumped up. I'm excited about the nature of a cell. Whenever I think about the cell, and I do study cell biology and cell chemistry all the time, pretty much every day I'm learning something new about the cell. The cell is just like a little municipality, and just like little municipalities, just like a city or a municipality has a waste disposal system, a cell has a waste disposal system too. And this is so cool when you think about it, because a cell is 1/100th the size of a head of a pin. That's how tiny a cell is. And we always say all disease is cell disease. All disease represents some kind of breakdown in the functioning of a cell. When we talk about a cell, it's important to recognize that even though this little tiny structure is 1/100th the size of a head of a pin, it can actually be subdivided into even tinier components, even tinier sections within a cell. There are little tiny subsections within this ridiculously small entity called a cell. There's little tiny, even tinier sections, all with their own little membranes, all enclosed with their own little boundaries, all located in specific areas inside a cell. This is mind-blowing when you think about it. You've got various sections inside a cell that produce energy. You've got other sections that store information. You've got other sections that provide structure. You've got little sections that are mini manufacturing areas. You've got little sections that are storage areas. And this, my friends, is all in the area that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin. These little substructures oftentimes are too small to even be seen with a microscope. You've got to use an electron microscope in order to see these little substructures. And this is in every little cell, of which we have 100 trillion. And the take-home message here, guys, is that this thing is very, very, very fragile. Yes, it's miraculous, and it's complex, and it's intricate, and it can do all kinds of different things. But in order to do its work, everything has to be just right. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of redundancy in the sense that there's many, 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 many trillions of cells. You have lots of different cells, so it doesn't matter if one cell breaks down or two cells break down or three cells break down. But once cell breakdown accumulates, that's when disease starts. All disease is cell disease means somewhere in the body, cells are not getting the energy they need to do their work. This very, very complicated system requires energy. It requires oxygen, it requires nutrients, and it requires prescription drugs. No, of course it doesn't require prescription drugs. That's doctor medical model stupidity. It requires nutrients and it requires oxygen. And only a boneheaded medical professional will think that you can get better by using a prescription drug. These cells that are so intricately nanostructured, nano-architected, that means designed at the nanoscopic level, 1 billion times smaller than a meter. A meter's maybe roughly a yard or so. Divide a yardstick up by 1 billion times, and that's the kind of size we're talking about. This little tiny structure called a cell has all kinds of little substructures in it. A substructure that contains information, a substructure that provides a skeletal system, a substructure that provides a manufacturing area. There's little ferries inside the cell that shuttle things back and forth. And there's little garbage incinerators that burn waste. Those little garbage incinerators play a major, major role in keeping the cell healthy. And by the way, this whole thing, this tiny little structure we call a cell, is coded with an information processor that can be likened to a computer chip. This information processor that coats this ridiculously tiny entity called a cell is on the order of 10,000 times thinner than a piece of paper. Take a little notebook paper, take a piece of notebook paper and look at it, and then divide it up It's width 10,000 times, if you can even remotely get there. And that's the size of the coating of a cell, this information processor, the brain of a cell that interprets the environment and sends the information into the various compartments. This is where the work of a cell begins. This is where the work of a cell is initiated via information that's passed into the cell through this brain on the surface, this brain that coats the surface, the so-called cell membrane. Understanding and appreciating and honoring the tiny little cell is critically important if we are going to understand how to take care of our bodies. What's more, this miraculous nature of a cell's complexity highlights the intelligence that I call divine. I call it divine intelligence because there's no other way it can be explained. The nature of a cell, the intelligence of a cell, highlights the divine intelligence that forms the background, the context, the too often forgotten context of every moment of our lives. It's almost as if every single one of these little cells was a tiny little city with its own little consciousness that in some miraculous fashion cooperates with trillions and trillions of other cities in a peaceful and orderly fashion that we human beings, we humanity, we the human race could perhaps learn a lot from, the divine intelligence of the cell. Now here's the take-home message. This is the bottom line. Yes, it's very cool. It's amazingly cool, and I hope you guys are getting a sense of how unbelievably awesome the nature of cell biology and the nature of a cell is. But here's the take-home message. In order for all of this activity to take place, and in order for this internal structure to remain intact, the cell must have energy. When we say all disease is cell disease, what we're talking about is some kind of lack of energy within this tiny little cell, and this is incredibly important to understand because until we get this idea, we're still going to be bamboozled by the medical model that says we can be surgically operated on to get healthy. We can be cut up like a Christmas turkey to restore our health. When we understand this unbelievable nature of a cell, when we understand that cell disease means a lack of energy in the cell, we'll see why this medical model that we're immersed in is utterly and completely useless, and we can see why our doctors, as nice as they may be and as kindly as they may be, for all their self-congratulating, your doctor is utterly helpless to reverse degenerative disease because at the end of the day, a surgical procedure, a drug or device cannot give a cell energy. Nothing a doctor can do can give our cells energy, but as we said so many times on this program, we don't need a doctor. We can do it ourselves through the mighty 90 essential nutrients, eating correctly, breathing correctly, and eliminating the stream of toxicity that enters into the body. Okay, so we started off talking about DMAE. By the way, you can get DMAE in the Ageless product from Youngevity. DMAE is a wonderful nutritional supplement for brain health, for focusing, for ADD, attention deficit disorder, and it's also very important for helping drain the body of aging pigment, lipofuscin. Lipofuscin is typically burnt in cellular incinerators, and these cellular waste disposal systems are super, super cool, and I'm going to hang tight and tell you about that on our next Bright Side episode. We'll talk about cellular incineration, how cells burn their waste, just like a garbage incinerator, just like a municipality will burn waste in a garbage incinerator. Cells have their own little garbage incinerators, and these garbage incinerators have a huge, huge role to play when it comes to health, when it comes to autoimmune disease, and when it comes to the aging pigment, lipofuscin. We'll talk about that on our next Bright Side episode. Thanks so much for listening in today. Time to hit our phones at 855-666.